Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. Our victim of the day is my old friend Dave Forrest. I got a lot to say about that, but Dave is the CEO of Kraken Energies, a new or renewed company with uranium in the USA. So Dave, why don't we go ahead and get the overview for your company? Why would you name it Kraken of all things? And then we'll get into our sordid past and all the questions I've got about what you're doing now.
Yeah, it sounds great. No, thanks for having me, Lobo. I really appreciate it. It's good to be getting back together. We'll talk about the past later on, but it's good to be back together. And so, yeah, basically, it's a pretty simple pitch. It's Nevada's largest past-producing uranium mine. So the things we like about the project are potential for American leading grade and size. So, and by that I mean the average U.S. uranium project is about 0.1%. And the historic production here is about 0.25%. And then also based on the geology we see, we think it has potential to be amongst the highest number of pounds for a deposit in the U.S. And as you know, this is a challenge amongst U.S. deposits, is they're often relatively small compared to other spots, around the world. So based on the geology,
hence the hub and spoke model.
Unique.
Sorry, hence the hub and spoke model. You put these things together.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, which is a very interesting model, and I think this may play into that as well, or may be able to underpin the development of a new uranium district, which is in Nevada is obviously interesting, right? In a place that's ranked as the best place to do mining in the U.S. So those are both interesting. The other notable thing about it is the geology is very, very unique. So one of the things that we keyed in on with the management team that I'll talk about in a sec, which is one of the other exciting things for me about this company. The geology is very, very unique. So there's no other deposit I know of that's analogous to this kind of geology in the US. And one of the unique factors is that it has associated gold, copper, and silver with it. So that's obviously, when I say that, people often say, oh, Olympic Dam. I'm not saying it's Olympic Dam, and there's some notable differences in the geology.
But you didn't say iron.
Olympic Dam, sorry?
You didn't say iron.
That's right. Oh, you're right. And you're right. That is the biggest difference, I would say, is that when you look at not to get too much into the geology weeds here, but if you look at real IOCG systems, the I, you're right, is one of the keys. There's usually a lot of iron. And there are what I would say are IOCG candidate districts in Nevada, but this is not one of them by virtue of the fact that it doesn't have a lot of iron around it. That said, I think like at Olympic Dam, the potential to have uranium produced alongside other, even if it's a different kind of deposit, having it produced alongside copper or precious metals is an interesting scenario. So so to finish the elevator pitch, the team we've been able to attract, and I think it's largely because of the uniqueness of the deposit. So our new chairman of the board is Garrett Ainsworth, who was the former VP exploration for NextGen Energy, obviously one of the biggest uranium stories on the market. Our new technical advisor, Galen McNamara, was senior project manager for the same company. Vivian Chuang, our CFO, also has uranium experience and Nevada experience. So the team that we've been able to attract, I think, is maybe as big or maybe even bigger of an asset than the project itself. I mean, we're really excited about the project, but as you know, projects come and projects go, and you can never really bank on one thing. But having a team and having a process for finding and evaluating and pursuing and investigating new projects, I think is a big part of this, about what we want to do. And at a time when America really needs some new thinking on uranium supply. We can talk more about that in a moment.
Sure. Well, our mutual mentor, Doug Casey, taught us the 7, then 8, now 9, last I counted, P's of resource stock evaluation. And the first P was always people. So let's go ahead and so full disclosure, audience, Dave and I are friends. We've been friends for almost 15 plus years. I helped him get a job once.
Thank you.
So, we go way back, and I want to get that out there. But I'm not cutting Dave any slack. I've got some questions here for Dave. You'll see in a moment. But I do want everybody to know that we are friends. I've known him for a long time. And But one of the questions I have, though, that leads to is like usually I'll ask some guy, he's some financial guy, he's from Bay Street or Pender and Howe, and like, you know, why are you the CEO? You're not even a geologist. But in your case, you are a geologist, so I don't have that question. But I do have a different slant on it, Dave. You're a newsletter writer, right? You became like me. You put your knowledge to work. You became a newsletter writer, and I know you're still doing that. You've got your finger in several pies that I'm aware of. You know, why would they put you in charge of this, and how much time do you really have for it?
Yeah, well, so when we started out, it was a pretty small team that was looking at this. So we really, it was myself and a few other geologists and an engineer who were looking at it. And we were, you know, it was kind of, it was a small team. And I mean, typically, so, I mean, I guess to back up, I'm involved in a lot of different things, project-wise and investment-wise around the world. And I love traveling and looking at like new opportunities. I love to get on the ground and out in the field and look at new rocks whenever I can. I've been going to Uzbekistan a lot lately, for example, to check out some of the opportunities there, which are phenomenal. You know, I'm always looking at those things. I prefer to work in a small team. I think small teams are more nimble, these things. So it was really a small group that was evaluating this project when it came to our attention. And, you know, I was the most suited person of that group to run it. I guess we could have gone out and headhunted, you know, a CEO from a big mining company and paid a lot of money for it. But you know, I mean, one thing I've got a background in uranium to some degree as an analyst. So when you and I worked together in a former life, I used to run the Casey Energy Speculator. And part of that was analyzing uranium during the big uranium bull market in 2005, 6, 7. So not that I'm an expert in uranium geology or anything, but I at least know enough about the profile of different projects around North America and around the world, I would say. So I've got enough to speak intelligently about it. And fortunately, I've been joined by people like Garrett Ainsworth, who I mentioned, who is an awarded uranium geologist, awarded for uranium discoveries. So having his guidance, but I guess it kind of came from the philosophy of just keeping the team tight. You know, I mean, I'd love if we can sort of philosophize about the junior sector a little bit here and get your thoughts. But I think one of the challenges in the junior space is that we often get too many degrees of separation between what's happening on the ground and what's happening in the boardroom. So, you know, like you really want your geologic team and your business team to be pretty well aligned and know what each other are doing, because the two feed into each other so closely. You know, I learned that, like, having had the wonderful opportunity to work with Robert Friedland. One of the things about him that's remarkable is he is always talking to his geos. He will phone his geos on the rig and get an hour-long update about what's happening, you know, and to see that kind of connection between the ground and the guy who's at the very top, you know, especially in a company of his size, is pretty amazing. And I think we often lose that. You know, I see a lot of management teams where the management, the people raising the money and promoting the stock, are not really engaged with what's happening on the ground. And so I think having keeping the group small is one way to combat that. You know, having that sort of just a small group that's very in tune with what's happening.
Okay, we can call it the Dilbert. We can call it the anti-Dilbert strategy, so that the front office doesn't, you know, go out and sell a product and then discover that that's not what you're exploring for at all. So I get that, yeah. But let's focus on the key question. How much time do you have for this? I mean, you're a busy man. You know, how much of your time is going into Kraken?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I'm working a lot, so I would say it's the equivalent of a full-time job. I'm equivalently working full-time on Kraken, more or less, and then doing everything else that I need. I was very encouraged when Elon Musk had that quote recently about how he works 18 hours a day and, you know, spends an hour with his kids and, you know, sleeps 5 hours or something. That it's kind of hit home. But yeah, it's a challenge for sure. That is a challenge. The saving grace there again is the team that I've got around me. So again, I mean, I'm going to contradict myself, I guess, a little bit, saying keeping the team small, but the team that we have is also very, very strong. And it's part of what's kept me going in this. Like I don't. Being a CEO probably isn't my dream job. It's something that well, this is a whole another interesting part about the industry. It's something that a lot of people in our industry actively avoid, actually, is being a CEO. And that's interesting, actually. That tells you something interesting about the industry, I think. But the thing that I really do like about it, and I particularly enjoyed about this company, is the ability to work with an amazing team. I mean, it's just when you get that environment where people are, sharing ideas really freely, and you've got people who are excellent at what they do. And I would say that goes all the way from people like, Garrett, our chairman, who's, obviously a leader in uranium geology, all the way down to some of the geologists, the field geologists we've had the opportunity to hire. We had one girl who was in the field for us last week, who's just phenomenal. Just one of those people who takes like utmost pride in what they do, obviously, and would be pained to turn out an inferior product. And getting to work with people like that is really an incredible experience for me. That really rejuvenates.
I understand what you mean. I couldn't put a number on it. I wouldn't want to BS the audience, but it seems to me that there's a correlation when I go on my due diligence field trips, and there's times where the geologist hops out of the truck and he's wearing, Gucci's loafers, and he doesn't have a rock hammer. And there's other times where, the geologist hops out and they've got, all this stuff in the vest and their hammer, and you got to pry them away from the rocks. They keep banging them. They banged them, 100 tours before, but they can't stop banging on the rocks. And the IR guy is like pulling the geologist off the rocks. We got to go to the next target. And it seems to me there's a correlation between that type of people and discovery.
Yeah, I think so. It's really it's so interesting. You just know right away when you see somebody who is really into what they're doing. And it's such a pleasure. I mean, it's just great. And it's a great environment, like that environment, right, where you have people like that who obviously know their stuff. The other thing I found about those kind of people who really know their stuff are very secure sharing ideas and accepting new ideas, right? Where people who may not as much are often more defensive about new ideas.
That's interesting. Now, I'm not enough of a geologist to be able to dive into that, but it makes sense to me on human psychology, sort of. But actually, before we go farther down that rabbit hole, why Kraken? I mean, okay, Kraken is big, I get it, but it's not exactly a positive image. I mean, a Kraken is a monster. He sank Jason's and the Argonaut's ship.
I guess that's true. Yeah. It was, it was a discussion about what was going to sort of stick out in people's minds.
Well, it does that.
And I have to admit, I was a bit skeptical when it first got proposed. It wasn't my idea. It was proposed by some of the people we were working with. But the reception, almost universally, the reception has been, people are like, I love the name. I wanted to call it Battleborn Energy, which is the nickname for the state of Nevada, the Battleborn state. But that got voted down as being too clunky. So Kraken's clearly got a better.
I guess I'd probably have sided with your board on that one, and it would have reminded me of Battle North, which took over that whole Rubicon fiasco.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Or Battle Mountain, the famous armpit of the United States, or is Battle Mountain the armpit? There's one of those towns in northern Nevada that actually has grabbed that moniker and run with it. Like they're proud now to be the armpit of the USA.
Oh, they're like officially the armpit of Nevada. I don't think it's Battle Mountain. We stay in Battle Mountain for this project. It's only about an hour away, and Battle Mountain's actually quite nice. It's
actually most of those towns. Yeah, I mean, if you're not looking for haute cuisine, I mean, most of those towns along I-80 are actually, as towns go, they're not bad. But anyway,
the best.
Just quick sort of technical note. How long before there's an actual website there with cross sections and stuff we can dig into if we're interested in your company?
Yeah, coming. It's coming. Well, actually, so if you go in the presentation, which is on our website. You can download at the bottom. We have references to a lot of historic reports, and there is quite a large body of publicly available historic reports, and we've linked them all in the presentation. So if you look at the slide that has the historic drill holes and things, there at the bottom there's a clickable link.
Okay.
So you can actually go through. So it's a bit roundabout, yeah.
Yeah, I probably didn't see that.
All of this has come together very quickly in a couple of months, so we're catching up with all of that.
Work in progress. But like a couple of weeks, couple of months. I mean, how close is that?
I'd say, yeah. Well, so I guess it depends what we're gonna put on there. Disclosure wise, the exchange is sometimes not thrilled about you posting old cross sections and things like that. So I think we may wait till we actually do our own.
Even if you put large blinking letters over the top that say "historic," don't trust this, it's all lies. But we're just showing it because it's interesting.
Any of this. Yeah. I know. It's funny how they do that, and people still read it and it's interesting. But yeah.
Right, well, sort of on that subject, if we can segue. History is great, and it's great that this was, biggest, baddest of them all. Maybe Kraken is a good name. But the world is very different now. And if that mine, as I read it, it shut down when the subsidies ended,
yes.
Why would the same mine work now without subsidies? Okay, maybe Biden wants to have subsidies again. But, just looking at the uranium market and the way the world is now, why should we be excited about this project, Dave?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you the reason that I'm excited about it is if you stack it up against its peers, it's got, leading or potentially leading qualities in all the categories. So
go ahead, take them off.
Grade and size mostly, and metallurgy, potentially metallurgy. So again, these are old reports and should not be relied upon. But there was metallurgical work done in the 70s that showed very strong leachability of the ore under both acidic, but especially alkaline, which is the more environmentally friendly process. So those three things together, well, I guess, and the fourth being the potentially associated other metals, right? So the copper, gold. The copper, gold, and silver actually is probably the most intriguing thing to me. I think actually, if you look at sort of the future for uranium in America, like and I'm fascinated by this challenge of the American uranium situation, because it seems so daunting when you look at it and the answer isn't really apparent. I think the one scenario that's very exciting is the production of uranium as byproduct from other metals, because that is just at places at Olympic Dam, that has worked so well. And it produces regardless of what the uranium price is, because it's not a uranium mine. And the handling's better. You're dealing with you can mine lower grade uranium, so you're not getting as much of an environmental footprint on it. If you can produce, it's funny. People always talk about high grade, as being, the higher the grade, the better. In the Athabasca Basin, so the uranium guys I've worked with have told me, there's actually a point past which you're too high grade, and it's actually the costs of handling that are prohibitive, where you'd want to actually ideally be lower in grade. And you can sort of run that math on something like Olympic Dam, right, where the grade of the input, the grade of the ore, is like 0.02 or 0.04% uranium, right? So it's incredibly low. But because of that, you don't have a lot of the environmental footprint that you do handling that ore. And I think that's part of why that mine has worked so well. And it still produces a ton of uranium because it's so big.
Well, let's come back to the grade issue. But actually, so on your fourth point, that was something on my mind. If it's just uranium and you know what dissolves it, you're going to get it out. That's one thing. But if you have all these other metals there, now you're talking polymetallic, and does that not complicate recovery? And if you especially if you care about these metals, if they're in such small concentrations that they all go to tails, you don't care. You just focus on the main pay mineral. But if you're trying to get everything out of there, so if you
Yeah.
could say something without getting in trouble about that historic work, I mean, what can you tell us without getting in trouble about the metallurgy?
Yeah, totally. So I can tell you they didn't study this part of it at all. So it was purely studied as a primary uranium circuit. So what we're doing actually, part of what we're just kicking off is a comprehensive study on kind of the processing options. Basically, we want to do a high level study on the general options for producing, so producing uranium in a bunch of situations, including as byproduct. So my understanding, again, I'm not a metallurgist or an Olympic Dam specialist, but my understanding is the processing at Olympic Dam is pretty straightforward in that it's actually just a flotation circuit like you'd have at most copper plus minus silver and gold mines, and then processing of the tailings on the back end in a secondary circuit for uranium. So if that's the case, and I'm also encouraged by the fact that that's a proven process there. This isn't I'm always a little worried.
It's not a science project.
Say, we're going to do this. Yeah, it's never been done anywhere. This is actually being done at Olympic Dam and a few other places actually. So.
And
So,
sorry,
again,
you're talking
Go
about
ahead.
uranium as a byproduct, though. I was thinking of it as, okay, uranium, and it has concentrations of these other things. Is there enough of the copper, gold, and silver that might actually be the primary value, and the uranium would be a side product, or other way around?
In short, we don't know the amounts. We don't know the sort of tonnage, but the grades, yes. So the historic reports on the mine, the gold ran up to 15 grams in some places. The silver ran up to 7,000 grams, and the copper was not reported in grade, but it was reported to contain bornite and chalcopyrite. So the bornite being encouraging because that's higher grade.
Right.
Yeah. So it's it's again, this is all very early stage,
And that's widespread. It's not like, sorry, that's widespread throughout. It's not like this one pocket with this polymetallic enrichment, or.
We don't know at this point. Yeah, that's because all of the assays from the 50s did not assay for any of that. All of those samples, like, so they only assayed for uranium when the mine was producing. And the only reason we know about the other metals is someone went back in the 80s and took a sample that ran gold somewhere. And the reason we know about the silver is that it was actually a silver mine before it was a uranium mine. So one of the adits in the 1930s was a silver producing adit prior to it being converted into a uranium adit in the 50s.
And
So
is there any old drill core?
No.
Ah, pity. All right. Well, you've got your work cut out for you there. Okay, let's go back to grade for a moment. And this is something that I saw in your presentation. It says regionally high grades. And I always have this question whenever I see that for these non-Athabasca plays. Everybody says, "Oh, well, for uranium outside of the Athabasca Basin, this is really high grade." Well, but the Athabasca Basin exists, so why do I care if this is good for second best, if you will? And maybe you won't, but explain that to me. Why do I care about regionally high grades when there's super high grade, waiting to be built or even to be put back into production right now in the Athabasca?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess part of it is that production, the production that's waiting to be put back online, doesn't meet the demand shortfall in the U.S., right? It's like we're talking 50 million pounds per year of demand shortfall, assuming all of that went to the U.S., it still wouldn't fill the gap. But you're right. When you look at the development projects that could come online, like next gen and fission, most notably. I mean, that would conceivably be more than enough uranium to supply the 50 million pounds a year that America needs. So, what's the answer to that question? The answer is I don't know. I don't know. You're totally right.
I don't know is better than bullshit, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is great having this discussion, actually. So we know that there's a huge will for uranium in the U.S. There's definitely a political will to have uranium mines on U.S. soil. You've seen this in Congress, the Senate. They've been all working on these bills. What's the reason? I suspect the reason is that they don't want to be reliant on Canada's goodwill. You know, what if Canada decides to sell it to
What if
England
Canada
or
decided to
China?
side with Russia?
Exactly. What would happen then?
That seems a little far-fetched, but okay. Um,
Yeah, well, I agree. You would think that America would be the most likely, place for them to sell the uranium. And yet there is definitely this will to have US domestic production. I mean they're worried the 15 million pounds a year that they get from Russia. There's real concern about not being able to fill that. Now, one of the ways they could fill that, I guess, is to offer a premium price, which they have done in the past. If the U.S. price was higher than the world price, say, but that again then would encourage domestic production as well, assuming that was extended to everybody. But yeah, it's a very good question. It's more of an empirical point to me. I can from what I read and what I see and what I hear in the U.S., there's a real will to have U.S. uranium mines, and I mean the reason is probably just good old paranoia. I think just like not
yeah.
not wanting to be reliant
All right.
on somebody else.
I won't beat you to death on that one. I have a hard time imagining, anytime soon where sources in Canada or Australia are not considered, friendly enough to count, as good as domestic. But I could see a time where Congress passes some sort of incentive or Biden subsidies that are specifically for a USA sourced. It's not anti-Canada or Australia. It's just America first.
We want to have, we want to have so much on domestic soil.
So,
and having this conversation with you is making me think all the more that the byproduct uranium from other metals is actually a very attractive scenario, because then you remove that part of the equation, right? You're producing the uranium anyway, whether it's whether
it gives you several ways to win, instead of being uranium only, and then how do you compete with double-digit percents in the Athabasca? Then you have at least another shot at the prize there. But okay, let's assume that USA production, and it's not so far-fetched, but let's assume that USA production will be incented, and therefore U.S. source uranium has maybe there's two uranium prices, international spot and U.S. spot, and that justifies which has happened before. Okay, let's go with that for now. There are mothballed production facilities in the U.S., and you're still just starting to poke at this big but historic project. So what if this uranium bull is over before you build a mine? How quickly can you advance this, and what can you tell a potential shareholder about the odds of you delivering value in this cycle?
Yeah, so I think you're looking at a long game for sure. Like if you're looking at developing a new uranium mine, it is a long game, right? You're looking on a 10-year horizon. So what you want to be able to do is show people that your project and your plan has the ability to underpin something that needs that kind of commitment to it, right? So the problem with a lot of the existing mines, from my perspective, is that the processing is a big, and this is the 100-pound gorilla in the U.S. uranium sector. The processing is there is no visibility at all what the processing strategy is going to be. There is one operating hard rock uranium mill in the U.S. It's mostly producing rare earths now. They've kind of moved away from doing uranium. Yeah, and vanadium, exactly. Yeah, they've moved on to other things. So there's two other mills that have permits, but which are basically shells with nothing inside of them. So what happens if you're going to, you're going to either have to run everything through that one mill, which is probably not going to happen, or you're going to have to build some kind of new processing facilities in the U.S. And if you're going to do that, I mean, that's a substantial commitment, right? You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, and you're talking like a long permitting lead time. So if you're going to do that and you're going to get financed and you're going to undertake it, you're going to need something that's big enough to justify that commitment. And I think the challenge is that most of the deposits that we know of in the U.S. are not big enough in terms of contained pounds to be worth it. So could you do like the hub and spoke model you were talking about? That'd be something. Well, and it works in some cases. Like what UEC is trying to do, I think makes a lot of sense with ISR. And ISR is one of the most obvious solutions to part of America's uranium problem. So you can definitely get 5 or 10 million pounds, I think, if we got all these ISR projects. That still leaves a pretty big shortfall when you look at the 50 million pounds that they need. So if we're talking the hard rock side of things, doing a hub and spoke is harder, I think, because those deposits are pretty spread out. Like if you're talking about trucking, and you don't get, with ISR, you get a very good concentration of the ore at site.
Right.
Right.
You're trucking the resin, the loaded resin. You're not trucking ore.
Exactly. If we're talking a hard rock scenario where you're having to truck ore, we've been looking at this. The economics get tough pretty fast. Not to mention all the logistics and the safety and the permitting for transporting uranium and the local opposition probably. So if you're really the solution, and it's one of these situations where when you look at it, you're like, I don't know what the answer is to this. There is no obvious answer right now, but it's a situation that probably needs to be answered. It needs to have an answer. And I've always found in my career, those situations are really intriguing, because when you have those, like a question that needs to be answered and doesn't have an obvious answer, it usually ends up attracting a huge amount of capital to the problem. And in this case, I suspect it'll probably be government capital plus private industry in some way. But again, like you need a deposit or a series of deposits that or a processing strategy, I guess, that justifies that big investment, that building of a new uranium processing, hard rock uranium processing infrastructure, which is really what America needs. So that, that's why I think like this project has the potential geologic zone. The geology is basically a granite body with a sediment package dipping off it, and the uranium's at the contact between those two. It's like a sandwich, and the crust of that sandwich runs for at least 10 kilometers or more, and there's uranium showings along a good portion of that. So that and again, this is early stage. We're not saying that we've got 10 kilometers of uranium deposits, but it's got potential. There's a sound geologic theory why it could be leading in terms of size. When you start running the numbers, you're like, that could be a size that could justify building a processing infrastructure around that, a new one. And I don't know of too many hard rock deposits that are like that.
All right. And is there, again, historical, not to be relied on all those 43-101 disclosures, but is there a historical resource left behind? Do we know that there are pounds in the ground there? Or is it all just this theory that there might be a lot of stuff along these 10 kilometers?
Yeah, there are several resource estimates for the old mining area, as well as some of the other areas. I've been told I probably shouldn't quote those.
Quote any of them.
Most.
Do you have a corporate goal for what you might be able to drill off in the first round or two?
Yeah, so I think if we got to something like 5 to 20 million pounds, I think that would be a good start, because basically the area where we're starting is the old mining area. So I think that kind of size, 5 to 20 million pounds, when you kind of run the economics, that kind of gets you into the game. That sort of you start to become serious amongst other uranium deposits in the U.S. If you get to, I'd say, 50 million pounds, then you're in sort of the upper decile of projects. And then if you get beyond that, that would be where it would get really exciting. If we got into like plus 50 million pounds, that would start to be unique amongst the, all the deposits in the U.S.
Okay.
And
The area of the old mine. Sorry, the area of the old mine. That's along about like what, along a kilometer or two, or how much of the 10 kilometers is covered by the old activity?
So the bulk of the old mine is about 150 meters by 150 meters.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah, you can actually, if you zoom in, you can see the disturb. There's 4 adits, so if you kind of take the area of those adits. Actually, this is one of the cool things we've done too. Again, talking about people who love what they do. The fellow who modeled all this up for us, Ben Hinkle. Shout out to Ben. Ben is a rock star. He put together all of these old maps from the 50s into a new computer model. So he digitized all these cross sections, all these old, all the plan maps. And so the computer model is super interesting because it basically shows there's a structure, there's a dike, an apelite dike that runs through the mine area. And most of the mineralization is associated with that, the highest grade mineralization at the contact, and then spreading out from there. So that structure, it looks like, continues both direction. It's a linear structure. It continues both directions outside of the mine area. So that's, we're starting to get a decent idea, I'd say, on what the potential controls are on the mineralization. And it kind of lends itself to this potential along the strike that you're like, oh yeah, it looks like it extends out into there, and nobody's ever drilled in that area.
Does that dike daylight, and can you see it poking out of the ground other places?
You can, and that's where we press released about a month and a half ago. One sample where it does come to surface ran 0.7%. So right above the old adits.
That's very good for non-Athabasca.
USC.
Okay, so all right. So what is the plan for this year, or what is your exploration plan immediately ahead? What are the deliverables your brand spanking new company is going to bring to the market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the biggest thing we're focused on right now is getting drilling on the area. So part of what we're trying to do with this company is have a strong ESG focus. And I know people have different thoughts about ESG, but really we've also been fortunate to have some good advisors on the ESG front who have uranium experience, ESG for uranium. And basically it's kind of about being organized about things and doing things properly. So one of the things we're trying to do is use an ultra low impact drilling approach. So drills where nothing really touches the ground as much, and you can just drive the drill in and drive the drill out and have a pretty minimal impact. So there's a process in getting that developed. We've used that technology in other projects and it's worked quite well. So we're engaging right now with the regulators about the drill permitting for that, for using that technology.
And sorry, Dave, just real quick, those regulators would be BLS or Forest Service?
The U.S. Forest Service.
Forest Service land. I have to ask that, what is there a time frame for expected permitting?
Right. So this is the thing. So the biggest question I get asked about this project is, how did you find this and why have I never heard of this? Which including that's what people like Garrett said as well. Garrett Ainsworth said, why have I never heard of this project? And that's the reason, is that it's located on Forest Service land, which, as you know, has been more difficult than BLM to permitting wise, or longer to permit, starting in about the 1980s. So I suspect, I don't know for sure, but I suspect that's the reason this project has never really been pursued in the last, basically since the 50s. So that was the real key with this, is when we looked at it, we said, well, this is a big opportunity if you can find a way to sort of unlock it. And yeah, waiting 2 years for drill permits is daunting for a junior company. So the idea is to use this low impact drilling approach, and to give you an idea like that, we've used that approach. The group that I'm working with has used that approach successfully in Forest Service in other states, Forest Service land in other states, to get permitted in 15 days under a notice of intent, just like you do in BLM, and has drilled. And yeah, in those places we've had a really positive experience with the regulators. Like, funny stories, like they came out afterwards to check the drill pad and couldn't find where it was. They came back and said, where did you drill? We can't find it.
That's good.
So, this is a wild.
Let me just jump in and say, I know that people do have mixed feelings about ESG. I've written about it. I wrote an article called ESG, the most valuable BS in the world. And I just got to remind the audience, whether you like ESG or not, whether you think it's all politically correct nonsense or not, the fact is this has become necessary. David doesn't have to say this. I can be the bad boy and say it's become necessary for permitting, and it's going to become more and more so. So if you want to stick your head in the sand because you don't like ESG, you are putting your own money at risk. Because if people don't, and it's not enough just to have nice green pictures on your website and talk about how friendly you are. You actually have to do stuff that reduces impact or offsets carbon emissions. So, what you're talking about, Dave, is not just handing out candy bars to the cute local natives or whatever. You're talking about doing something that substantially mitigates impact. So that makes
more investment too, right? We have a lot of funds now that will only invest in something that passes their ESG.
Well, and if Biden's subsidies come through, and his subsidies would be only for companies with good ESG bona fides. And that doesn't mean just a nice website with verbiage. You have to do stuff now. You have to allocate. This is the difference. You have to allocate significant capital from your exploration to your development to your mine plan, whether it's electric trucks or whatever it is. You actually have to do something in the real world, or you're not gonna get a get out of jail free card on the ESG front. Anyway, sorry.
Totally.
So I'm glad to hear you're taking that. So.
Can I make one last point about that
Sure.
too, that I've been thinking about a lot? So years ago, I had a call with the exploration manager for Newmont, and this was when we were starting my last company, Sunward. And what we wanted to have the topic of the call was, what do you look for when you go to buy out a junior mining company? When you go to do a due diligence visit and you're thinking, should we buy this company? And so he gave us a whole bunch of points, but one of the things he said a good HS&E policy, health, safety, and environment, which is not surprising. But then he said something that was surprising. He said, we actually consider a company having a good HS&E policy a leading indicator for discovery success, for technical success. Companies that have good HS&E find things more often than companies that don't. And he explained that it's a function of those companies are just organized. Right? If you're organized enough to put in an HS&E policy and implement it, you obviously have the ability to think in an organized, rational kind of way.
That
also
is interesting.
That's always stuck with.
Sorry, I that connects to something else that I was thinking. This is off the side road here, but again, I can't put a number on this. But in my mind, there's a strong correlation between particularly for producers that have, if not spick and span, it's a mine, it's a hole in the ground, of course there's going to be dirt, but things that are well organized, well maintained, well painted even, clean within what a mine can be clean. There's a correlation between that and operating results and the bottom line. And I think it's like that. If you're disorganized, things will break down. You're not going to have the spare parts you need. Your fleet availability isn't going to be what it's supposed to be. So it might seem like, why are they wasting money, painting everything and making it all spick and span? But it's just a sign of making things organized, having pride in your work, doing things right. And it's not surprising to me at all to hear that in their experience correlates with success in the discovery field.
Exactly. When I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. But I just, I'd never really thought about it in those terms before. But I think it's probably ESG probably is like that too. if you're foresighted enough to go out and design and implement an ESG program, it at least shows you're capable of designing and implementing a program, which is, a good thing for a lot of stuff. Like,
Yeah, well, we don't need to beat that one to death. Okay, so you're working on getting your permitting. Any sense of ETA on that? And do you have the money to drill, or when you get the permit, what do you drill off the known area? Do you start doing regional, or what are the goals for us over the next year, Dave?
So we are funded. We have $12 million in the bank. We have a drill, so we put a deposit on a drill, which is that's a big thing these days, is actually having a drill. So we've got a drill that's ready to go when we're ready to go. I'm not giving any guidance yet on the permitting timeline, because it's basically an approach of engaging with the regulators and sort of explaining this new approach, and there's several different routes that Forest Service permitting can go, as you know. So the intent is to use this to demonstrate that the drilling has no substantial surface impact, which in our experience has substantially speeded up the timelines in other Forest Service projects. And then once we get drilling, the goal is to initially start in the old mine area, basically in the guts of it. So there's a fair bit of old drilling that we've been able to digitize, and old underground workings. So drill in that to confirm the mineralization. And again, like I say, it appears to be related to that kind of linear structure, that aplite dike. And then basically expand along strike along that dike is the obvious place to grow it. And then also looking for parallel dikes. So we just completed a mapping program across the mine area and the surrounding area. And the big goal of that was to look for more of those aplite dikes, outcropping either parallel or in different areas. So that's kind of the near mine plan. And then we just announced.
And sorry, what would the budget for that be?
Well, the holes are pretty shallow, right? So the deepest drilling in the mine was about 150, 165 vertical feet. So you're talking like 50 meter, 60 meter holes.
Yeah, that is pretty shallow.
So yeah, it's pretty shallow. I mean, one interesting question is what goes deeper than that? And in the old reports, that was the biggest potential for expansion they saw, was drilling deeper on that structure. So that's, those are kind of that's sort of the meat of it. So the budget would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for that initial program. I think 350,000, something like that. And then results, obviously pending results, then start expanding out. We're engaging with uranium consultants, SLR, who to kind of understand what the drill spacing we would need for our resources. That's an important part, because it's such a unique deposit, understanding what the spacing is that you need. And then, so then look at those parallel, we don't know if they'll be exactly parallel, but other aplite dikes that seem to be the controls. And then we just announced too, we've increased our land package by about tenfold around it. Yeah, so we've now got about 13 kilometers of strike length along that contact I was mentioning. So part of what we'll do next too is fly a airborne radiometric and mag program. The mag primarily for structure, and the radiometrics obviously to look for uranium anomalies. There are several uranium showings historically. So then following up all the radiometric anomalies with field prospecting, and then seeing if those turn into drill targets similar to the mine.
Well, the good news for that is you don't need permits. But let's say things don't go quite as fast as you hope, and you get permits, but not till, say, this fall or something, after some months. Are you at elevation, and would you then have to wait for next spring, or are you at a low enough altitude, or is it not so much snow? Could you drill in the winter if you needed to?
You probably could. They do get a fair bit of snow up there, but you probably could access it. It would depend on the month. It kind of freezes and melts depending on the time. It's on a west-facing slope, so when there is snow, it often melts fairly quickly. But yeah, that would be a concern. I would say we're very cognizant of that factor, of the sort of timing factor and and the news flow, the potential gaps in the news flow. So like I said at the beginning, one of the big assets I think of this company is the team. So having sort of a bunch of good minds in the uranium geology, and I'm hoping to add to that in things like uranium engineering and sort of, ESG, like I mentioned, all these things. Using that as a platform to acquire more projects, I think makes sense. And we're focused on Nevada. I think Nevada, being in the ranked best mining jurisdiction in America is it makes a lot of sense. So we're reviewing other opportunities as well with the team to sort of see what other things might be good add-ons to this project. And I think diversify. I mean, this is another thing, actually, another philosophical thing that I've kind of been thinking about. In the junior mining space, I don't think you trust projects. I think you trust process. So, you and I both know, right? Even the most promising project can turn out, when you put the drill in, you just never know what you're going to get. And if you kind of live and die by one project, you're probably going to be in trouble. There are ones where it works out. But what you can trust is process. When you have a good team and you've got the people who can do all those steps to quickly work up a project, work up a cogent theory about it, and then go out and test that theory, and then decide quickly whether it is worth pursuing or not pursuing, because that's another problem, is we often spend a lot of money on things that aren't worth pursuing, when very clearly they've been proven to be not worth pursuing. So what if you have that process in place of identify a new project, evaluate it, move on to the next one if need be, that is something you can definitely trust. And in my experience, the most successful companies have been, the Lundins were a great example of that, right? That they had many projects that did not work out, and they were very ruthless about cutting them out, about just not throwing bad money after bad money and just getting out of it. And sometimes you had to wait. Sometimes there was a gap and you had to wait for them to identify a new project, but they always did. And they would always bring in something that was worthwhile. And I think that's a testament to the team that they had.
And so you mentioned diversifying in this team, but the team is kind of uranium focused. Would you be looking at other uranium projects, or would you be willing to look at other metals if you found something?
No.
Keep the story on uranium.
Other metals, yeah, I think we're committed. So the overarching mission here is to help America solve this intriguing and daunting problem about needing 50 million pounds a year and having next to nothing. So we're going to stay uranium focused. The caveat I would add to that is that situation we've been talking about producing uranium as byproduct from other metals, I think is an intriguing, other metals and other commodities. Actually, there's a bunch of interesting situations where uranium can be produced, but yeah, that would be interesting. But certainly everything has a uranium component to it. That's the team we've got, that's the particular expertise.
All right. And if you don't mind, I wanted to ask a quick historical question. What was Ivor Exploration? And you have such a nice share structure. Was that rolled back and packaged into this new company, or how did Kraken come about?
Ivor was a company that had a project in BC, that in British Columbia, that again didn't work out. So when we took it over, it had, I think, only 12 million shares out. So that was part of the attractiveness of using it. It started with a very low share structure, and then like you say, we've come out now with a pretty good amount of shares for where we're at.
All right. Okay. Well, so then we're waiting on permitting, but we're ready to go. We have the drill. We're ready to go. We're cashed up, and we know what we're going to drill. And it sounds like the initial proof of concept isn't a big program. I mean, altogether, less than $1 million to see if it's what you think it is, and start stepping out if it is. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And you're potentially looking at other projects, but you don't have any right now. It's all.
That's right.
focused on this right now. Okay, all right.
Yeah, apart from the larger land package around the old Apex mine. So I mean that you could argue there might be several projects, on as part of, they might be distinct projects or maybe associated, but yeah, all part of one big thing. And
I'm trying to remember. I think I've driven by Apex a number of times, but never stopped. Obviously, didn't have access, but I think I've seen it pointed out that that's what that was. But okay, maybe not.
It was quite an active mining area. Well, I mean, back to the 1860s. It was actually one of the largest silver rushes in America. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I understand the deliverables, and I understand your. So we'll see. We've been going at this for almost an hour, Dave. So it's probably good enough to wrap up on. But I wanted to ask you the question I always ask everybody in this, and that's the old skin in the game question. Not counting, seed shares you got for a penny or anything like that. If you want me to put my money into this, how much of your own cash have you put into this, Dave?
$100,000.
And is that a lot for you, Mr. CEO? That's a good. All right. What percentage does management and insiders own? Do you know that number?
So I have 3 million shares myself. Jay Suger has 2.5 million. Garrett Ainsworth has 1.5 million. So that's about, let's see, 2.5, 7 on, that's 12 or 13%.
Yeah.
Right there.
Sounds about right. Okay, well, that is a fair amount of skin in the game. So we hope that your interests are aligned with shareholders, and I know you'll do your best anyway. But I have to ask. It's always interesting to see, and sometimes the answer has been sweat equity. And I put these projects together. I didn't put any money, but I staked them, or I did this, and I got this company going. And I think that's actually a reasonable answer. If somebody's put years and years into putting a company together, I think their interests are aligned and they want to see it succeed too.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, what is a substantial amount of money to put in? I think for me that was, I really liked the project when I saw it, and that was kind of the amount of money we needed to. One of the good things is we didn't need a lot of money to get this going, get it started. It wasn't we had to go out and pay somebody $10 million to buy it. The vendors who have become our partners in the company vended it in for shares, so they've become, they've got skin in the game too.
How about a royalty? Is there a royalty?
There is. So part of the package is a 3% royalty, but we did an interesting structure there where we can purchase the royalty. We can put the royalty into a royalty company where Kraken shareholders will get 50% of the shareholding in that royalty company. So you'd actually get, and we did that. You're probably familiar with Great Bear, how they spun out their royalty into a new company. So we were kind of thinking about that model and thinking this is an additional way where we can get exposure to a royalty company. I think we could see a situation where uranium royalties might be a pretty hot item. So that's kind of, that's an additional upside to Kraken shareholders.
Okay. Well, you've been a good sport with some tough questions here, Dave, so I'll let you have the last word. Is there anything else you want to make sure the audience knows?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is, it's kind of like that. Was it Shaquille O'Neal who said, he started doing the best in his career when he just started kind of looking at, like, how can I make the world better? And that sounds like lofty words, but to me, I think the really intriguing thing about this company and this project is the opportunity to address a really intriguing and pressing problem. So this issue of U.S. uranium supply, notwithstanding the U.S. being flooded by Canadian uranium at some point, this challenge is really intriguing and really needs some new and fresh thinking around it. And I think that's the big opportunity here. And that's the thing that really excites me about this is having the chance to work on that problem. And I feel very fortunate to have a team around me that I think is the right one to address part of that. I don't think we're going to be the absolute answer, but I think we're positioned to be part of that. And it's been a lot of fun kind of looking at all the ideas and having a really good dialogue with a bunch of people who, like I say, really know their stuff in the business. So we're hopeful that we can make a difference. And if Shaquille O'Neal is right, that ended up making him a lot of money. So hopefully it will for us and our shareholders too.
All right. Well, good luck with it, and keep us posted.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me, Lobo. This was awesome.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Have a good one. Thank you for watching this edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. If you enjoyed or found value in what you just saw, and you're watching this on any sort of social media, please do hit the like button and the share link. Send this on to anybody you think might be interested. That helps us out a lot. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button as well. The number of subscribers helps us get more valuable content to you as well. On the subject of subscribing, I'll quickly say that if you're not a subscriber to our free weekly Speculators Digest, I encourage you to sign up. I promise if you do, we will not send you a flood of daily advertisements. You get one free weekly digest with original research not published anywhere else. Check it out at independentspeculator.com. Thank you and have a great day.